Building a portfolio with Fidelity Basket Portfolios is kind of like making a sandwich. It's as simple as picking your stocks and ETFs, sort of like your meats and other topics, and managing it as one big, juicy investment. Now that's pretty good. Learn more at fidelity.com/baskets. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. Member NYSE SIPC.
Today on CityCast Denver, the tipped minimum wage debate is heating up at the state legislature and it's boiling over on social media. Are Democrats really about to cut the working person's paycheck? Then there are some big changes on the horizon for Denver's noise ordinance, impacting everything from trash pickups to outdoor festivals. Me and producer Paul Caroli dig into these stories and more news of the week. Today is Tuesday, February 25th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Hi, Paul.
Hey, good morning, Bree.
Let's talk about a special thing we're doing at Heyday. Have we talked about this yet?
I don't know. We've talked a lot about Heyday. I mean, if you haven't heard us talk about it, it's an indoor fair with a distinctly Denver twist coming up on March 8th.
March 8th.
You can get your tickets now at heydaydenver.com. But what is the part that we haven't talked about?
We have a costume contest.
Oh, yeah.
We've been percolating on this contest for a long time. We're really excited.
Celebrity guests like Patty Calhoun from Westward, Justine Sandoval, our Politics and Green Chili correspondent, 9 News' own Kyle Clark. Imagine Kyle Clark
judging your costume for the Denverist Denverite. Mm-hmm. However you want to interpret that. That is the costume contest. So it's really a wide swath of things you could be. We've already gotten quite a few contestants, but we can.
There's space for a few more.
There's space for a few more. We really want some more. However you interpret the Denverist Denverite, whether that's a person, a place, a thing, an idea, a vibe. Mm-hmm. Make that into a costume.
I was walking by that shop in McGregor Square that sells all the Nuggets and Avalanche and Broncos gear. And I was like, should I tell my wife that I'm entering this costume contest as an excuse to buy myself a Jokic jersey?
Just let her see it at the event.
You think?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking about this because I was on South Broadway over the weekend, and I was at Fancy Matthew, and they had a shirt I almost bought that said Colorado. Mountains and shit. And I was like, I could get behind this shirt. I was like, I might wear this and dress it up with a couple other Colorado things. But anyway, you can enter this contest. And if you win, you get a Topo Designs backpack. Those bags are so
Topo Designs.
Nice.
You could win the contest showing up with Topo Designs all over.
Yeah, maybe you're Topo head to toe, and then you win a Topo Designs backpack. You get gift cards to Culinary Dropout and Blanco, 2 great restaurants. Are we revealing all the prizes?
We can reveal one more.
You get a CityCast Denver ribbon.
Like a blue ribbon and you get it at Country Fair, but
it's the CityCast Denver style one.
For us, yeah. I mean, that's a keepsake. And also, if you enter the contest, you get 2 free tickets. So you get to bring someone to watch you get roasted by Kyle Clark. By Kyle Clark. Excuse me.
Enter this contest. We'll put a link in the show notes. Mm-hmm. Again, it's open to interpretation. I have to say, this is like Halloween in that we want to see whatever your greatest vision or version of the Denverist Denverite is. This is all you. What does that sound like and mean to you? And what do you want to parade on stage and get roasted by Kyle Clark?
I can't. This is my favorite thing that we're doing.
I'm kind of sad that we can't enter it because I really want.
You can enter it.
Well, that would. I feel like that would feel unfair.
That would feel bad. No.
Yeah, but
I mean, you'd be showing up looking like you. Which is okay, that's a pretty Denverite right there. That's Bree Davies.
There you go. In my Uggs, So yeah, we would love to see you. We would love to see you at Heyday in general. But if you want to submit, if you want to be a part of this contest, we'd love to see you there too. So check out the link in the show notes, submit, and join us.
All right, let's talk about the news.
Okay.
What do you want to start with?
I mean, I have to say the talk of my social media was this weekend. Paul, we've been following this story for a long time. It's actually part of a bill moving through the legislature right now. It's concerning the tipped minimum wage. Can you give us the too long didn't read?
Sure, yeah. I mean, to catch y'all up, I've been obsessed with this now for months. But the proposal at the State House brought by some local Democrats, including Stephen Woodrow of Denver, is to
Democrats.
lower the tipped minimum wage. This is brought after restaurateurs have been talking about a crisis. You know, they talk about restaurants closing, and they say they're in crisis, and it's in part because labor costs have gone up. Specifically in Denver, where we have this rule that's about 5 years old that increases the minimum wage every year based on inflation or consumer price index.
So this is just one way
Yeah.
that this issue restaurants are facing is being approached. Because again, labor costs are up, yes, but rent is expensive, food costs, supply costs. There's a lot of different things, and this is one way that some folks think they're going to solve that.
Depends who you talk to, honestly.
I have to say.
Once you start getting into the details, it's like every restaurant's got their own situation. We had Scott Wasserman, formerly of the Bell Policy Center, real influential Democrat. He's one of the guys running this whole thing. And then Juan Padro of the Culinary Creative Group, the CEO of that big restaurant group, they shared some data with me, and they showed me this chart that was like, for them, at least at one restaurant, the labor cost is clearly the thing that's going up over the last 5 years. Everything else is steady. The rent is steady. The cost of goods and services is steady. And it's the labor that's gone up by it's almost doubled over the last 5 years based on this chart at this one restaurant.
Yeah.
So that's what they're talking about a lot.
Yeah, this is interesting to me just because, I don't know, I'm a fan of the working people, and this feels like a tough way to go about this, because as these wages have gone up, people's rents are still expensive. Like, they're still trying to make ends meet. So, but what have you? I don't know. What else have you been hearing? This is getting some traction now in a way that
it is.
I hadn't seen, say, last week.
It is. I think if I had said 6 months that local Democrats are going to be talking about lowering the minimum wage, you would have told me I was crazy.
Yeah,
but
in
here
Denver?
we are. The first committee hearing last week at the State House in the Business Affairs and Labor Committee, this bill passed 11-2. And so this bill, specifically what it would do would be to lower the tipped minimum wage, the base wage that tipped workers get, by $4. Now, it doesn't mean that they'll make less than minimum wage, because restaurant owners who pay people based on this system would still have to cover up to the minimum wage if they don't make it up in tips. But that base wage means that the restaurant owners would have to pay their tipped workers less.
Mm-hmm. So also something I noticed this weekend was because of where this bill is, restaurant owners have been testifying in support of it.
I mean, there was a huge committee hearing before the vote last week. There was it was, I don't know, 5 hours long, I think, but I've got a huge long list of these restaurants of people who are behind it. It's pretty much unanimous. I mean, the Colorado Restaurant Association is behind it. A lot of these hotshot chefs and restaurateurs behind it. City O City was represented. Esther's Denver, the Cherry Cricket.
Cherry Cricket employs a lot of people.
It sure does. Fox and the Hen. So that's Carrie Baird, one of our top chef contestants, famously was there. I love Fox and the Hen. It's so hard because, you love these restaurants, but it's like, damn, you want to pay workers less? This is such a tough.
Well, that's what I was going to say was this list that you just read off of. I was seeing this list put in a different context online, which was, here's restaurants I'm boycotting because they're supporting this bill.
Interesting.
So I thought that was just an interesting.
Did it seem popular, the calls for boycott?
Yeah. I mean, I think there was just more conversation of people wanting to understand what was going on.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of been oversimplified.
Blisteringly
right?
complicated.
Yeah. It's not just like they want to cut the minimum wage. It's deeper than that. And I think that was what was getting lost in the conversation. But I just thought it was interesting because I was seeing this list in two different contexts.
Yeah.
You mentioned Democrats being really big behind this, but have we heard from Democrats that are not in favor?
We're starting to.
Okay.
We're starting to, because I think what's happened is the city auditor came out last week, had a big post in the Denver Post, had an op-ed. And also Matthew Fritz Maurer, who runs the wage theft division, who I shouted out on the podcast during our previous coverage, he emailed me. He was like, thanks for shouting me out. I'm super into this whole issue. And he sent me 5,000 words of charts and data. And it was like, okay, they're getting ready for a big push. But basically what the auditor is saying is, look at what tipped workers are making. You're talking about paying these people less. That's what this bill is about, paying these people less. He says the average tipped worker, this is Auditor Tim O'Brien, the average tipped worker in Denver makes $45,000 a year. And this bill could cut their wages by as much as $8,000.
Goodness.
Think about rents in Denver right now and taking an $8,000 haircut on a $45,000 a year salary or wages. I mean, that's not every server, because sometimes you work at a place where like the restaurant's really cooking, but if that's the average, I mean, that's
saying something.
That's really saying something.
You know, I was talking to someone yesterday who was working in retail, and I was in a store and I was just talking to the clerk, and she was saying she had gotten out of restaurants after she had been a lifelong restaurant worker after COVID because customers were so mean to her and she was over it. And I just wonder, a lot of these folks did live through COVID. That was a really tough time for servers in particular when restaurants weren't open. And so I'm wondering if some folks in the industry are thinking, okay, it's really my time to get out of here. Some of those seasoned workers, people that have been doing this for a long time, like I would be concerned if I was them.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of them might not have a choice. You know, if the restaurant closing narrative is actually true, we talked about the facts on that last week, then a lot of these jobs are just going to be going away. And this is what Scott Wasserman, you know, like I mentioned earlier, he actually emailed me last week with some more of his own data because he saw the auditor getting involved and he was like, well, let me give you my side of things again. And he says that those figures the auditor quoted were based on, I think he said, the data is bogus from Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that $45,000 a year average is based on data that shows people making less than the minimum wage. So he says that whole data set is bogus that the auditor is pushing. And that what you should actually be looking at is job losses. And between June of 2023 and March of 2024, Denver lost over 3,000 jobs in the restaurant sector. So he's saying if restaurants are closing and people are losing their jobs, isn't that worse than people maybe making a little bit less? Like maybe the restaurateur should be able to have a little bit more control over the overall money that comes into their restaurant and not have as big of a percentage go towards paying these tipped workers.
Yeah. I think that part of the problem here too is that restaurants vary so much, right? When we talk about a restaurant group owning a restaurant versus a true mom and pop owning a restaurant
versus a Red Robin
versus
or
a corporate,
McDonald's,
right? There's all these different types of ownership in this space, and it's all getting compressed into one conversation where you may be working for your friend and it's their sole, they're the owner, and it's impacting them directly as to where you may be working for a Chili's. Sure. And that's not hitting the Brinker Corporation in the same way.
Yeah. And there's a million specific situations too. Like some people are paid in really informal relationships with your boss. You know, maybe it's a family restaurant. And then also the other thing I think is interesting is like we had someone write in, they sent a voicemail in about this, but they were like, tip pools. Why aren't tip pools more common here? Doesn't a tip pool solve this whole problem of like back of house, front of house disparity in pay? Because a tip pool is like when you go in and you tip at a restaurant, all the money from all the tips goes to one place and then it's distributed equally, or it's distributed along some kind of like specifically agreed to formula. But the thing about tip pools I was reading up on, asking some people about is, if you're a real hotshot server and you're raking in buco tips and you're a high performer, then you're going to get hurt by a tip pool. The thing about servers is there's this, it's the specific type of job where you get rewarded for really excellent work that you do. And so if you're stepping into any kind of restaurant where you don't have that opportunity, that's not going to be for everybody. Some people want the more equitable, the more fair, the more equal pay that a tip pool or like a service fee would lead to. But some people love that more like, you know, I'm going to go out and have a big night. I'm going to go out and crush it and then not work for a week kind of lifestyle.
And I think, again, that's where this is such a spectrum, right? Like, I have to say, I do know lifelong servers from when I worked at Chili's that still work there, and that works for them. But I'm thinking more of that, like, you know, that being my college job versus my friend that's worked at Barolo Grill for 10 years because she's a professional server. So it kind of just like, there's just such a wide spectrum of who this is impacting.
Yeah. I mean, it's surprising that these lawmakers are taking it on. But honestly, right now, what's most surprising to me is how many Democrats are on board with this.
Yeah.
After last year, the narrative after the national election of Democrats being out of touch with the working person.
They're not doing themselves any favors with this situation in that argument.
Just to put, I mean, no, that's just one way of looking at this, but honestly, it's a little bit shocking.
I think it is too, especially in a state like Colorado.
Yeah.
I mean, So where do we go from here? We're waiting. It's went through committee.
It's going to another committee. It's going to the finance committee, and they're going to probably put some better numbers on this, maybe try to sort out some of these discrepancies, and then we'll see. I mean, at some point, it'll go to a vote in the full House, and then the Senate, and then Governor Polis. We'll see what he thinks. We know he wants to have the conversation, but I think that's all we know.
I know. I was like, where does he land with labor?
I want to know what the mayor thinks, too.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see. And again, it's going to impact a lot of people in a lot of different ways, us included as diners.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll see some shifts here. This episode is brought to you by Cap Management. Cap Management is a Denver-based HOA management company serving townhomes, mid-rises, and high-rises. From staffing, accounting, project management, careful reserve planning, customer service, and more, CAP serves properties that appreciate working with an engaged, proactive team with the expertise to work with the most complex properties. Many of their clients make up the skyline of our wonderful city. CAP is also the only HOA management company with a sustainability mission, dedicated to guiding HOAs in how to operate in a sustainable way, navigating ordinances like Energize Denver and Colorado's Building Performance Program. I'm just thinking about when my mom took over her HOA and got them to install those car chargers. Looking for Brooke to manage your property? Well, she's available. I'm just kidding. CAP is working to envision the future of the HOA industry, like their partnership with the University of Colorado to pilot the nation's first sustainable HOA certification framework. If your HOA is looking for help, visit capmanagement.com to learn more. That's capmanagement.com.
Hey, Bree.
Oh,
We're here talking about Heyday.
do you want me to do this or not?
I heard you had a story about the Adams County Fair.
Okay, so picture this. It's like 1990. I'm wearing like spandex neon biker shorts. I'm like 10 years old. They had this contest, and if they called your number, you got to get in this box, this clear plexiglass box with a fan underneath it. And for a minute straight, it blew money at you. And you had to grab as much money as you could in the 1 minute, and then you got to keep everything you grabbed. I grabbed 27 whole dollars. And as a 10-year-old, that was like the most money I had ever had in my own, like that was my own money.
Wow. And that's the kind of magic that's going to happen at Heyday. Get your tickets now. It's an indoor fair with twists on all your favorite carnival classics, Denver style. March 8th. HeydayDenver.com.
Maybe I'll find some biker shorts and recreate my outfit. Okay, next story. Is Denver about to get a whole lot noisier? I'm asking because by the time listeners hear this, City Council will have voted on it, but there's some changes coming to the city's noise ordinances, Paul. Is it going to get louder here?
Yeah. Well, I talked to a gentleman named Paul Riedessel, the public health senior analyst of the noise program at the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. Which is just a fancy way of saying he's the guy that's going out into the bushes at 2 a.m. to try to catch people who are dumping glass bottles into the dumpster behind the bar. And he's been doing that since 2003. So I had a great conversation with him, and he was like, in some ways, maybe, in some ways, this is probably going to be really, really good for the people of Denver who are sensitive to noise.
Oh, it's going to be better for them.
That's what he said in some ways. Now, specifically what's changing, according to Axios Denver, if they pass this, which they almost certainly will.
City Council.
Is it would allow trash and recycling trucks to begin their routes at 6 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. So louder, earlier. You know, we all know how loud that is. It would also allow festivals on public property to be 5 decibels louder, but would require a hard stop at 10 p.m. And it would allow, it would say public events on private properties it would allow them to up their noise levels to 80 decibels, but only 8 days a year and no more than 4 consecutive days. And then a few other smaller things around enforcement as well.
You said until 10 p.m.?
Yeah, apparently it's looser. You know, it allows these festivals to be louder longer. And the reason why they're doing that is because the noise program folks, Paul Riedessel was telling me that they had a lot of public comment about this. And what they heard from people were people want more festivals in Denver. Cool stuff to do. And festivals want more flexibility in being able to be louder and longer. And apparently those new rules around festivals actually align the noise regulations to OSHA regulations. So like for what a worker would be allowed to experience.
Okay.
That's where it is. So it's not like some huge drastic change. It's more like a small increase.
I'm fascinated by this conversation, but I live in a
too.
very loud neighborhood. So let's talk about some of these noise complaints happening around Denver. Like I'm thinking off the top of my head, like construction noise or loud music.
Mm-hmm.
What did Paul tell you?
Those are some of the big ones. Apparently, since 2003, when he started this work, number 1 and number 2 sources of noise complaints have always been construction, and then on the other side, trash and recycling.
Huh.
So trash and recycling, that's interesting because they're making it earlier. They're allowing it to be earlier. But here's why that's happening. He says alleyways are getting busier.
Really?
So trash and recycling trucks are having a hard time navigating alleys around school buses because that 7 a.m. time period is when school buses are coming along. And the other thing he said was, because we're expanding recycling and compost, there's going to be a lot more of these trucks on the streets in the morning. So they need more time to do these pickups without conflicting with things like school buses.
I have to say the noise complaint aspect of this is strange to me because it's not like they pull up next to your house and empty the recycle for an hour. Like it's 30 seconds and they move on. But so to me, that's like a normal noise in a city. That doesn't seem outrageous. But I also understand that some people
are sensitive, are
very sensitive to noise, which I am not. But I can't be because by nature of where I live and my husband's profession. Mm-hmm. I live with a drummer and I hear that all the time. Also, but my neighbors like had a full Bonda band in a tent the other night till midnight in their backyard, which was admirable because it was 10 degrees outside.
That's crazy.
But
that
I was
might
like,
have been a call for me just for their own health and wellness.
See, I'm like,
Call
to me, I'm
Paul
like,
Riedessel.
this is the neighborhood I signed up for, I think is what I would say.
Which is another interesting thing about this. The thing Paul Riedessel said to me is the neighborhoods where there are the most complaints are the ones that have been changing to become more residential in the last 20 years.
So like
Rhino.
Okay.
Less industrial, less empty warehouses, more residential buildings. That's more people moving into places where there are perhaps
next to existing venues. For instance, I'm thinking of a very famous situation with the Meadowlark patio, which was so beautiful, so good, such a great place to see shows. And then they built some condos around it, and those people did not like that there was an existing venue there.
Right. Number 38 as well.
Let's
Similar
talk.
situation.
I was just going to say, let's talk about number 38 because it's at 36th and Chestnut. It's right in the heart of the situation. What happened with them?
Well, it was kind of the opposite of the Meadowlark, interestingly, because there were the condos and the apartments, but then the number 38 built their venue outside.
After,
And they had all these noise complaints because they were doing live music.
Sure.
It was a huge, big deal a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But what was exciting to me was Paul Riedessel told me that they reached a solution that apparently has been extremely effective. They did a combination of like moving amps and reorganizing how the music would be oriented.
Sure.
Like to just point it in different directions, which, thinking about sound engineers, they can do stuff like that. And
absolutely.
Make sure sound doesn't go at apartments. But then the really innovative thing they did was they installed a computer program that put a limiter on the noise.
Oh.
And so whenever the live music approaches this cap, it automatically blocks the amps from amplifying any
like
louder.
Cuts them out.
Yeah. Now, it can get quite muddy if it's not like the sound, if it's all at the same frequency at this cap, if they don't have a sound engineer on hand to like actually adjust it and make it sound better. But Paul Riedessel said he has had zero complaints
since they made
this change. Which is just like, what a great success story for technology, right?
I was just going to say, what a beautiful step in technology. Because again, I think a sound engineer is an underrated person and profession because you don't notice if sound sucks. If the sound is really good, you don't notice. If the sound is bad, you notice immediately. So there's folks always doing this at every show you go to, theater productions, even events where, like a charity event where someone's just talking on a stage. All of these things are controlled by people that really understand sound. So that's really a cool thing. I'm just thinking back to that. We were talking about, I don't remember we were talking about this. My friend that is a stage manager that said the Red Rocks complainers, the people that were complaining about Red Rocks, and he said they just had a calendar of events and would call and they would call and a show had been canceled and they'd be like, you're calling for no reason. So I just think about those whiny people. But it sounds like this is some improvements all around.
Can I share one more story?
Yeah.
Okay, this is my
'Cause he
favorite
told you
thing
a weird-
Paul Riedessel told me. So I asked him just like, what are some like, weird sound things you've dealt with over the years? And he said there was one time a few years ago, he started getting some complaints from neighbors around 6th Avenue in like Capitol Hill, Congress Park area.
Okay.
And their complaints were like, there's the sound of a jet engine somewhere.
Right.
And it's
in
a
this
problem.
part of this in the middle of the city, frankly.
And the way that the regulations used to work is he would have to go out and actually like capture the sound himself and measure it himself in order to enforce it. And it was quite irregular. So he just got himself in the habit of driving past on his way home from work. And so one day he was driving past and he heard it. And it was, in fact, as loud as a jet engine. So he gets out of his car, he goes up to the house, he knocks on the door, talks to these people, and they take him out to the back where they have been building a jetpack. And it is chained and it is anchored into the cement. So it they don't fly away. But he confirmed it was as loud as a jet engine. And he didn't even measure it. They were just like, we know it's too loud. We're actually moving outside the city right now.
Okay, I was going to say, that's when you're like, you guys need to get a workshop that's made for this kind of thing.
He told me the company's been successful, though. He heard that they did some like jetpack aerial show in Dubai, too. Like, so just for anyone who heard that sound a few years ago and thought, what the heck was that? It was a jetpack, and those guys were winning.
Oh my God. That is crazy. I would feel like I had lost my mind if I was hearing that, because I'd be like, there's no way I'm hearing a jet engine. I'd love to hear from listeners. Do you live in a noisy neighborhood? Is there something that you've been trying to figure out? What is this noise? How do you feel about the noise ordinances? Give us a call on the Is Denver Too Noisy hotline, 720-500-5418. Let us know where you live and what you hear. I'm so curious.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
This episode is brought to you by Abercrombie. There's nothing better than the perfect jean and going out top combo, or an outfit that perfectly matches your plans. Abercrombie's relaxed jean goes with every occasion. Date nights with something lace, or daytime with a cozy sweater. And their barrel jean will surprise you. It's the trend that will become a staple in your wardrobe. Abercrombie denim comes in tons of rises, fits, and washes. Find your perfect pair online or in store.
We got to do some listener comments here.
Speaking of.
Yes, because after Friday's show, where we talked about the new Lumineers album and the Lumineers Guide to Denver, Lumineers Nation rose up. That's all I'm going to say. We got a lot of comments from folks who did not. Let's just read a couple. Can I read a couple?
Go for it.
Okay, this is a text from Gina from Alamo Placida. Hey there, Gina says, commenting on your critique of the Lumineers, as someone who moved to Denver in 2013 because of the vibe and the weather and the proximity of the mountains, I just want to say that I was a little disappointed in the negativity. The message felt exclusive of folks who chose to come here. I grew up in the Twin Cities. I adore Prince and Bob Dylan and all kinds of Minnesota music, and I think it's cool that folks who make Minnesota their home at any point are welcomed. Whether you like the Lumineers music or not, they highlight their love of Denver. Why is that a bad thing? You might like different things than them. You likely like different things than me, and that's cool too. I love your show, and that piece just kind of brought me down. It felt exclusionary, and that's not what I usually feel from you. Just sharing my thoughts. Thanks. Thanks for writing in, Gina. Any thoughts on that, Bree?
Certainly a take. Yeah, you heard how I felt on the show. I think the Lumineers are crying into their $100 bills right now. I think they're doing just fine playing Empower Field. To all of you that love them, good for you. Go buy a ticket, enjoy the show.
I have to say, I felt what Gina felt. I said this on the show,
sorry.
but the Lumineers story is, I relate to this story. I moved here in 2015 for some of the same reasons. And it hurts me. It hurts me when we talk about stuff that makes people feel excluded from the city. And I do not want that.
I think what you're talking about music, though, like to me, no one is going to agree about how they feel about music. Like it's art. It's subjective. Okay.
If you're saying that the Lumineers can't represent Denver because they weren't born here.
No, I don't think we said that. Jason said he moved here when he was 13, our guest. He's like, I'm not from here either.
But the tone of the conversation was these guys are not Denver.
No, I think my problem was it was like, let's move to the middle of nowhere. That felt a little bit exclusionary to me. That was the quote I had. I tried to back that up with a quote from a story from 2013 where I felt like the Lumineers were saying Denver wasn't anything before we got here. And that was exclusionary to me. So that's where I took it personally. It was like, you know what? Cool. Come join our music scene. But like, be respectful that other people were already here doing it. Some of us did not grow up here, but we were trying to make it something really special. So
I appreciate that clarification. Let's get another one from Lumineers Nation. This is a DM from Matilda. CityCast, I love y'all, but what's with the Rhino 5 points hate? Saying you'd rather spend time in a suburban strip mall than one of the main and most interesting neighborhoods of downtown Denver? Saying it's not a place for, quote, regular life in Denver, despite being one of the most diverse and dense parts of the city? Ouch! But the east side of the train tracks is better, and I'll stand by that. Thanks, Matilda.
If you're an East Sider from the East Side, I respect that. If you're from the special taxing district known as Rhino, I just don't. There's a certain vibe about what is considered Rhino that does not feel fun or welcoming or interesting or diverse or any of that to me. But you know what? To each their own, right? We all have different perspectives of how neighborhoods feel. And Rhino has never felt like a neighborhood to me. 5 points, absolutely a neighborhood. There's my distinction there.
I 100% think Rhino is its own distinct neighborhood. I think it is a different place than it was 15 years ago when they pushed out the artists and hurt you.
Yeah, well, my friends were homeless, but whatever.
Yeah, it was traumatic. It was harmful.
I wrote about it plenty. I think people could read about it if they really cared, but it's just one of those things.
We'll put some links in the show notes. Personally, I think the neighborhood is different now. I think it's different people running it. I think it's a very different feeling. I went on a nice walk in Rhino yesterday. And actually, later this week, we're doing our guide to March. I decided after this episode, I'm going to do an exclusively Rhino guide to March. I'm giving Paul's guide to Rhino in March this week.
Oh, well, good.
So stay tuned for that.
This person will be really excited to hear that.
I can't wait to share my picks with you, Matilda.
Thanks for writing in. We always love to hear from you. Thanks, Paul.
See you next time.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell your noisy neighbor about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. And if you love the show, come see us in person at Heyday, an indoor fair with a distinctly Denver twist on Saturday, March 8th. Get your tickets now at heydaydenver.com. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya.